Well, that's completely irrelevant to what I want to now discuss with historian and broadcaster Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Welcome to the show, Rafe.
Always a pleasure, Kevin.
Now, what I wanted to talk about, he's been given promotional interviews for this excellent show. I do recommend it, genuinely. He's talking about Britain. He says Britain, in the past few years, has, in his opinion, fallen off a cliff. And he said that now we have hit rock bottom. He basically says nothing works. Potholes in our roads, terrible services, the NHS, complete mess. Nothing works well in this country. And we've fallen off a cliff. We've hit rock bottom. Who does Mr. Clarkson blame for this? Well, he says this is all down to socialism. And then he narrows in on our socialist leader, Keir Starmer, who he said manages to be annoying even when he's not being annoying. But I just thought it was an interesting thing to say. And I think there is a sense among millions of people in this country that something's going wrong with this country. We have gone downhill. It seems to be a worse place to live than, shall we say, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. I blame the Tories for the decline a great deal, but I do think he's got a good point that now the socialists have got their hands on the helm. We're in big trouble, and he's blaming Keir Starmer and Keir Starmer's government. But do you agree with what he's saying, that there is this pervasive sense that Britain has somehow fallen off a cliff into an abyss of decline, and that we've now hit rock bottom? What do you feel, Rafe?
Look, I don't care if you're left wing or you're right wing, if you're woke or unwoke. You'd have to have lived in a cave for the past few years not to know that Jeremy Clarkson is absolutely right. Britain is broken. It's not due to Keir Starmer and socialism. It's due to this uniparty. It's Labour and the Tories and the great harm that they've caused to this nation for the entire 21st century. Let's make no mistake about it. The 21st century, 25 years we've had of national decline, and it's been particularly pronounced within the last decade, certainly since 2008 and the credit crunch. But in the last decade, people really have this sense of decay and stagnation all around them, and it's on the local level, it's on the national level, it's cultural, it's social, it pervades, it infects every aspect of our society. The young people today are the first generation to have a poorer quality of life than their parents.
Yeah.
We see our neighborhoods are deteriorating, potholes in the roads, council services reduced, bins overflowing, high street shops are boarded up. But there's a housing crisis, there's a social care crisis, immigration crisis, cost of living crisis. The NHS is in perpetual crisis. But there's also this wider sense of hopelessness and frustration that nobody in authority has a clue how to fix any of it. But even worse than that, they think that our leaders have been actively complicit in damaging the nation. And there's this sort of feeling now that all of our institutions, the political class, the media, the police, the civil service, none of them have our interests at heart.
Exactly right.
The British people.
That's exactly what it is, Rafe. That somehow or other, successive governments, right up to this one, which may well be the worst, have not been spending money, the national finances, on us, on the people. They've been spending it on their own ideologies, on their own virtue signalling, on their own cause célèbre. Clarkson says in this interview in the Telegraph, he said, for example, London's really suffering, I think. You see streets and think, God, this was thriving not that long ago. Now it's all boarded up. Or charity shops. As you walk around for the first time in all of London, you're conscious about not being on your phone. Be careful. It's a big change. It's socialism. The sewage doesn't work. Mobile phone coverage has got worse. And the potholes. He goes on to say, I know I'm sounding like an old person now, but it is shocking. I don't know what they do with the money. Well, I would say, particularly now we've got these Tories, but the socialists, this Labour lot, but the Tories weren't much better. I think what's going wrong with this particular government is this. Their entire philosophy is this. Tax the private sector to the hilt. Sort of, in a sense, rob hard-working individuals and successful businesses of as much money as possible and give it to your rapidly increasing public sector, who don't do very much, who don't even bother to go to work. They all work from home, servicing ministries that are completely empty all the time. So you take all the money that innovative, spirited, entrepreneurial people make, and you give it to people who sit around at home working from home and don't go to the Ministry of Defence or wherever they work. I think it's that. I think that's one of the problems. The money is all going to the public sector and it's not being spent on the people of this country.
Well, it's a good point you make. When we were growing up, Kevin, we always had this stereotype of French bureaucracy, right? That the French state was bloated, this huge left-wing bureaucracy that they had there. I just saw a stat very recently, the last couple of weeks. The British civil service is larger than the French.
Is that right?
Yeah,
because their civil service is massive, isn't it?
Yeah. We have a more bloated public sector here than France.
That's ridiculous.
This happened not under Labour, this happened under the Tories. This is why I talk about this uniparty, this elite class who actually aren't that different from each other, and they don't have our interests at heart. As you quite rightly said, they're going after, remember, right, Boris Johnson and net zero. This was the Tories were more green than the Labour Party was as well, remember that. And of course, fundamentally, it was the Tories who brought in mass immigration as well. And you have to understand our low productivity. Nobody links our, productivity is the greatest crisis we face. That's why our economy is stagnant. Nobody has been brave enough to link that to immigration, let alone the fact, of course, that we've had essentially low-skilled immigration coming in and the burden that places on the taxpayer because they are a net burden from the moment that they set foot on this country. £7.5 billion a year is paid out to 1 million foreigners through universal credit. That's just one thing entirely. And of course, because of that, you see all of our public services, our GPs, our hospitals, our schools, housing, all under the pressure and the weight of all of that. And of course, we've had the furlough scheme, of course, where we kept the young, physically active people who could have been working, who of course would not have been affected by COVID, just may have been sick for a few days. Only the elderly and those with comorbidities were dying from COVID, and we kept them at home. And all that money that was supposed to have gone to levelling up the Red Wall, you remember Michael Gove was the levelling up minister, and the Red Wall lent Boris Johnson that vote in 2019 to improve the infrastructure, the railways and the neighbourhoods of the north. All that money was spent on the furlough scheme, and now of course we're broke and we've got inflation and so forth. And added to all of that, of course, we have this constant war of attrition to erode our national self-confidence. So we see around us decay, but all we're seeing from the political class, from the media, from our cultural institutions is this never-ending attack on British culture and history and identity, which just saps the soul. And so intellectually, mentally, spiritually, physically, everything just seems broken in a spiral of decline, and our towns and cities across this country, people watching the show, they go out on their streets, their own towns and cities bear no resemblance to the places that they grew up in. They are living in a foreign town quite often, and quite often they're becoming increasingly third world towns.
Let's talk about absolutely, and towns that, as you quite rightly say, people who grew up in them don't recognise anymore because, frankly, they've allowed a kind of cultural invasion. And you have lots of cities in the north or places in the north now, where great swathes of the population don't even speak English. Completely different culture to ours. So there's that. Now, I think one of the other aspects of this sense of decline is, this country's, this nation's addiction to welfare culture, to benefits. You talk about axing benefits or cutting benefits. People say, you heartless SOB, you're awful, you're inhumane. Do you know what we spend every year on welfare in this country? It's about £303 billion. £303 billion pounds. Now, I'm not saying any proper Western democracy should look after its vulnerable people. It should look after those who deserve welfare. Unemployment, fair enough, as long as you look for a job. We should help all of those people. But frankly, this country, I mean, we give huge amounts of welfare to people who've got jobs. We give loads of benefits to people who are working. I mean, we are addicted to welfare, aren't we? You take a country like America, which is far from addicted to welfare. Look at its economy, look at ours. Look at the happiness of the people in America, look at the happiness of the people here. Benefits and welfare don't make a nation happy. I think they spoil a nation.
Yeah, and of course we're at the stage now where we've got probably 3 generations of people who have been born into that benefit culture. So they don't actually have a history, they don't have a background of a working culture from which to draw some sort of inspiration. All that they know is the culture, the society of benefits. And that's one of course that one of the arguments for mass immigration was, oh well, the indigenous British population, they won't run restaurants, they won't work in the NHS, they won't be cleaners, we have to import these people too. I'm sorry, for hundreds of years, we had British people working as waiters, working as cleaners, working as charwomen, cleaning lavatories and so forth. What's changed, of course, is there's no incentive for these people to do it because they can earn more money from benefits.
Yeah.
What we need to do is we need to incentivize people to go and do those jobs, but that means you need to pay them a decent wage. And what's happened is big business has been very happy to flood the nation with migrants who will work for a low wage. And so the jobs traditionally filled by British people are now so underpaid that, of course, they don't want to do that. You need to cut benefits so that people get more money from going into the workplace. But, of course, you need to improve pay and working conditions so that people can actually get job satisfaction. But the thing is, though, if you go to places like Liverpool, for example, I was in Liverpool recently in the hotel, all the chambermaids were Liverpudlians. Everybody working in the hospital were Liverpudlians.
Good.
So one of the things, when you get to areas where actually there isn't a migrant community, you do have white British doing those jobs. But it's in the rest of the country, it seems as if people just rely on migrant workers to do the jobs that their grandparents would do.
And, ever since I was young, and that's a long time ago, I've heard politicians for donkeys, decades now, saying we have to make work pay. We cannot continue it being more profitable to be on welfare and benefits than it is to work. They've been saying this for 50 years and it is still a massive problem. I think another problem, as we discuss the decline of Britain, let's hope one day we get a government that can turn this great nation around.
Fingers crossed. We've waited a long time.
Yeah, well, let's keep our fingers crossed. You never know. But I think one of our problems is culture is this prioritization of what I might describe as woke cobblers over the practical realities of running things properly. We've got left-wing teachers brainwashing generations of kids, churning out generations of morons who think being kind, trans rights, climate change are all far more important than going to work and paying the bills. So we have a real problem there as well. It's all, being kind and wokery are all very well. I'm not that keen on it all myself, but they are being prioritized over, as I say, running things properly. And that is a massive problem. What we're witnessing, I think, bit by bit, is the mass destruction of traditional British common sense.
You're absolutely right. And this is the fundamental difference to the past, which you've highlighted. Britain went through terrible economic hardship in the past. After the Second World War, you had rationing right through the 50s. In the 1970s, we were the sick man of Europe. But back then, you always have economic peaks and troughs. We were still culturally intact. People had the same values, they had the same beliefs. There were class distinctions between the working class and others, but actually we were a cohesive whole. We had the same outlook on the world, and now we don't. We have completely different views. We have the most radically left-wing youth in history, whose moral compass is completely different to people even just 10 years older on all sorts of policy issues. We've never seen such a disconnected youth as we have now. Plus mass immigration, people who don't have any buy-in, who don't have any loyalty to this country, or they don't have any reason to feel proud to be British. So it's very difficult actually to recover from our state as we did in the 70s and in the 50s. Now, in 1979, we had Margaret Thatcher and her economic advisor, Keith Joseph, who unleashed upon sick Britain this economic revolution that fundamentally changed the face of Britain. What we need now is a similar person who can do the same thing, but not just for the economy, for our culture and for our society. That's a huge task, but we need a revolution in this land to shake us out of this malaise and fundamentally transform how we see ourselves and how we function as a country. And I don't see, unfortunately, anybody on the political landscape who's up to that task.
Well, I'm not going to add to that, Rafe, because that was beautifully summarised, our crisis summarised there. And yes, we need someone. We need a hero to save this nation. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, historian and broadcaster, thank you so much.